Hey everyone, it's Rajiv and welcome back to my channel Rajiv's Reviews. In this video, I'm going to be giving my book review of a book that I have been dying to read since I heard about it, which is the fourth book and the prequel to the Hunger Game trilogy called A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I received the e-copy version of the book today and I had to start reading it as soon as I got it, and even though it is like 500 plus pages, I just could not put it down. So before I start talking about my thoughts and opinions of the story, I'll just give a brief synopsis of what it's about, and don't worry, this is a spoiler-free video. The story takes place around 64-65 years before the Hunger Games trilogy, where the capital is hosting its 10th annual Hunger Games. President Snow, who you would know from the trilogy, is just 18-year-old Coriolanus Snow, which I'm just going to refer to him as Snow because his name is like a tongue twister, which is difficult and a bit dirty to pronounce. Anyway, Snow and his family are on the verge of poverty because they have just lost most of their money to the collapse of District 13, because they had a business of their supplies in District 13, and because of the Great War, there is no more District 13 now. Now again, with the 10th annual Hunger Games, similar to before, there are 24 tributes, 2 from each district. But what's different here is that rather than having a mentor from their own district, there would be 24 students from the capital who would be acting as mentors for each of the tributes. And surprise, surprise, Snow gets to be in charge of mentoring the girl from District 12. Lucy Gray Baird, a nod to Wordsworth there, she is chosen as the girl from District 12, and she makes quite an appearance which immediately catches the interest of Snow. Now, as Snow starts to interact with Lucy more and more, he becomes confident that they would have a chance of winning the Hunger Games, which in turn would also redeem his family name and secure a better future for him. So the story follows as to what happens to Snow and Lucy and some of the other characters. And similar to the previous books in the trilogy, the book is divided into 3 parts. And in this story, the first part is about Snow meeting Lucy, and the second part deals with the games itself, and the third part deals with what happens to Snow post the games. This book was very entertaining and I really enjoyed reading it. If you have watched my previous videos, then you would know that the Hunger Games trilogy is one of my all-time favorite young adult trilogies. So I was very excited and I had big expectations when I started reading this book. The first thing which I really liked was the pacing. Just to recap, I loved the first 2 books of the Hunger Games trilogy, and I was so disappointed with Mockingjay because it felt so rushed and there was such a disconnect to the previous books because it did not have the games in it. So I was hoping that this book would not be like Mockingjay, which thankfully it is not. Everything is detailed out and there is enough time for me to process what was happening. And I felt like in some ways I was reading the first book. I loved reading the first 2 parts of the book and thought the third part was a little slow because it became a little repetitious at times, but it still picked up towards the end and I really enjoyed it. Secondly, I actually loved how all the games are back. The Hunger Games in this book, of course, are not as advanced as the ones you see in the trilogy because, of course, in the trilogy it was the 74th and 75th anniversary, and in this book it's just the 10th anniversary, so we're talking about years before. The capital is not bold and flamboyant, and a lot of the rules are still a work in progress, so don't expect the same games that you read about in the trilogy. But even apart from that, it still had the same effect on me and I still found it so entertaining. It reminded me of those old gladiator type battles that take place, and it was so intense to see some of the contenders like Reaper and Jessup and Coral, because they seemed kind of crazy and unpredictable, and you really did not know what they were going to do. In fact, there is this one scene in the second part where Lucy comes out singing this tune, and all these snakes just come and envelop on her and make a dress of her. That scene was so amazing. If Katniss is the girl on fire, then Lucy definitely is the girl of snakes. I'm already waiting for the future movie to come out just so that I can watch this scene on the big screen because it was just so amazing. So now the question is this book as good as the trilogy? Sadly to say, no, because in the Hunger Games trilogy, Katniss is the main character and she is the underdog with a good heart, and you just root for her from page one. But in this book, the main character is actually Snow, and even though he has his good parts here and there where you actually like him and you think that he is a good person, there's a lot of things that he does which is not so good. But it is interesting to see how there are certain incidents that take place in this story which leads to the person that he is in the trilogy. Even though I didn't really like his character at times, what's really interesting is that this is one of those books where you love to hate someone. So I was very conflicted in some scenes because I really wanted Snow to be a better person and to do the right thing, but it just did not turn out that way. Lucy Gray is also amazing, and I feel like in some ways she should have actually been the main character instead of Snow in the story. But then thinking about it, I feel like that would just end up being a version 2 of the Hunger Games all over again. So yeah, probably not a good idea. Sejanus is also a very nice character who you immediately root for as soon as he comes in. And he has such good intentions and my heart just went out to him in the story. The villain of this book is Dr. Gall, who I would say is very devious and cunning and so manipulative that if another prequel came to this book, then I would probably want to read about her because I felt like she is even worse than Snow. And yes, we also get to see Tigress, who was kind of an interesting character in book 3, but you really don't get to know much of her. So that was a nice nod to see how they brought that character in and how she is connected to Snow. Anyway, if you have not read the Hunger Games trilogy, then of course you can still pick out this book and read it because it is a prequel to that. However, I would recommend that you read the trilogy first because there are some terms like Avox, which is not clearly mentioned in the story, and also the rules of the games are not clearly defined as how they are in the previous books. So I would recommend that you read that before reading this book. Overall, while I still don't think this is better than the trilogy, I am just so happy because I am a complete fan of the trilogy and I was just so happy to see the games back in a book format and read something new, which was different from the trilogy, but it still had its moments. So just for that, I would give this book 5 out of 5 stars. Before I wrap up, I want to ask, and I was just curious when I was reading this, but did the author mention Lucy Gray's name in any of the previous books in the trilogy? Because I feel like I read her name somewhere while I was reading this book, but I still could not recollect where I read it. Anyway, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes releases today, so if you are in the mood for a good dystopian YA novel, or if you are a fan of the trilogy, then you should definitely pick this book out. If you enjoyed watching this video, then please do like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care, stay safe, bye.